It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. Let it be Friday. Gary, how are you?
Not good. Not that when I saw the wholesale numbers, I went, whoa, the wholesale inflation numbers. It was like, oh, boy, man, oh, man, oh, man.
Yeah.
Up double what they thought it was going to be, up 0.6 in 1 month. That's 0.6 of 1% in 1 month.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah, and core PPI was also double the expectation. So, wow. I guess inflation isn't transitory. I guess it's not. You know, this is, we're just going to be here for a while. Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's the new normal. We're so doomed. Janet Yellen. It's transitory.
Which you have to ask the question, did she, in a way, give her own type of mea culpa, which really wasn't a mea culpa, but because she knew these numbers were coming out?
Yeah.
Or she sensed these numbers were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And since she's been wrong so many times, she had the thought, maybe I'll make it seem like I know what's going on now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The Producer Price Index, which measures the pipeline cost for raw, intermediate, and finished goods, jumped 0.6%. On a year-over-year basis, the headline index increased 1.6%. Two-thirds of the rise in headline PPI came from a 1.2% surge in goods prices, the biggest increase since August of 23. Retail sales increased 0.6%, less than expected. And weekly jobless claims filings nudged lower to 209,000. Did you see, though, that it was? I saw this last week. Like 11 out of the last 13 job numbers have been revised lower.
I didn't see that count. I saw that some had. I didn't see it was that many. Yeah, well, what's going on then with those surveys then? Is the question. And because that's what happens. Basically, the survey's not quite finished when you get the jobs numbers. And then there's 2 more revisions, and those revisions are basically the completion of those surveys. So what's off on those surveys that it's revised 11 of the last 13 times?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Been revised down.
Right. Yeah. Don't know. But we're likely going to start seeing more, layoffs. You're going to get to the point now where you see a number of what was it, Family Dollar closing some stores, 1,000 stores. That's an indication of, again, because if you build, I've always actually had a question about how you build something. Well, it's the dollar store. Eventually, you're going to, even with normal inflation, you're going to get to a point where, you're going to have a lot of things that aren't $1, or you're going to have next to nothing that will be priced $1.
Well, I think, they call it wholesale now. That means it's already affected manufacturers out there and people in business that produce anything on the wholesale level. So that has affected them. But the retail sale inflation, in all likelihood, is just happening now because was that January numbers or February numbers? February.
February numbers.
Yeah, February numbers. Mm-hmm. So the goods and services may be coming into the pipeline now that was affected, by the wholesale, because the wholesale happens before the retail inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you make a great point when you talk about this could nudge up unemployment, because if people have spent the COVID money, then the wholesale prices go up. Then you have a problem with the retailer, just raising their prices.
Right.
Because then there comes to a point, okay, if we raise the prices, well, then people aren't going to buy it. So what do? Your only recourse is to make less of a profit yourself, lay off people, use more automation, or raise your prices.
Right. Yeah.
Those are the only choices that you have. And so that's all coming down over the next couple of months.
Yeah. Right.
Because the wholesale happens first, the wholesale prices, then it gets to the retail. So there's a delay in it, and that's the concern. So bringing up unemployment, because that's the thing. When will it affect what will it affect employment? We know it's affected the actual cost of goods and services.
Mm-hmm.
When will it really start affecting employment? And that's the concern.
Well, and that's exactly what happens when you go in and you see these areas that have raised the minimum wage, again and again and again. The market will adjust accordingly. It will raise the cost of the goods and services to the point the market will bear, and then beyond that, it will start laying off people. And when you look at that, all of the costs that we talk about for individuals, insurance and everything else, when you do that on a commercial level, when you factor that in, what it costs to run a store on the retail level, well, it starts with your cost for humans, employees. And then when locals are saying, okay, we're going to raise it to $20 an hour, $15-20 an hour, and the marketplace doesn't adjust, it can't adjust for that. The valuation on that employee just isn't there. Then you start having your insurance costs and inflation basically on everything. The cost of doing business skyrockets to the point that then those locations are no longer profitable. This is something that Family Dollar, Dollar Tree is realizing. And they look at these, what they call these unprofitable stores, and say, okay, you basically have to take all these, and it's a total of 1,000, nearly 1,000 by the end of the year. This is a discount retailer. And so you look at the factors where you can't, if you can't be in that retail part, that retail segment, that discount retail segment, and also have to incur those costs without eventually kind of changing, the prices have to go up. It was, I think, Dollar Store and all of the so-called dollar stores started raising their prices. It was like a lot of things that were on the shelf for $1. By the way, not everything in the store was $1. That's not, that wasn't really the point. But they had many things that were $1. Then they took them to $1.25, and we kind of adjusted to that. And then it was like, okay, everything else is going up, and then the valuation, we do that. Consumers do that. I'm going to go in there and they've got all these things, but it's still a bargain by comparison, but we still pull back even at that level, even at the discount retailer level, we pull back on what we're going to spend simply because we don't have the spending power we did before. Mm-hmm. It's not a hard thing to figure out, and eventually that's going to start affecting companies and employment. And then, introduce into the equation, Bernie Sanders wanting a 32-hour work week, and Democrats once again saying, see, families would have more time to go to church. They can't go to Wednesday night service because there's no time. If we were only If we only had more free time, this is what I hear from my constituents. I want more free. Well, everyone wants to stay home or be at home and get paid the same.
Oh,
who doesn't?
We'll have a discussion on that. That was it the Maryland employee, the head of DEI,
yeah,
that has promoted violence like crazy.
Yeah, right.
And so basically saying violence is the answer. We need to burn everything down,
yeah,
and start again. But then in her writing, she talks about the fact that she doesn't want to work.
Right.
And all I could think of is, don't you understand that if you're going to advocate violence, and that's your goal, to advocate violence, that's a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah.
Violence is a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah, you got to be very motivated to be a violent person.
So if you're not motivated, if you're simply saying violence, but you just want to do nothing, that's going to be tough to lead the violent overthrow, because violence requires an effort and the work to commit violence. And
except for the fact that silence is also violence.
That's what she's going to. Yeah. All right. Silence on her part. Silence
I'm
is
staying
violence.
home and being quiet. Because silence is violence.
But when the other thing about inflation, when you look at the wholesale inflation, just to put it in perspective, it's double what they thought it was going to be. Now it's wholesale. So it's not the retail level, but it has that effect. If you look at it, if you extrapolated that over a year, 0.6%, that's 7.2% in wholesale inflation. And they expected it to be 3.6. Mm-hmm. Now we know that inflation, depending on whether you talk about all inflation or the core inflation, is was it about 3? What was it last time? 3.2, 3.3?
Yeah, I got to go back.
And core inflation was like 3.8.
Yeah,
whatever. And so you see, they expected wholesale inflation to be about 3.5, and it ended up being 7.2. If you extrapolate that over a year.
Yeah.
Now, that will find its way into the marketplace, into the retail marketplace.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah,
and so it's going to, now it may hit it in different ways.
Right.
As we have stated, it could be the increase in cost. It could be a combination of increasing cost, laying off, automation, AI. It's not what you want to see. And that was the shock, I think, was that it was so not predicted by anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody thought it was going to be that amount.
Right.
And that's the problem with long-term inflation.
And
government spending.
And spending that continues.
Right.
And all that.
Borrowing.
And think about that, too. There is no... The Fed isn't talking about raising rates again. They have not been serious about getting on top of inflation at all since the beginning. And now their only question is, okay, when do we stop, or when do we start lowering rates? You're not on top of inflation. So you're going to just sit here? Politically, you can't raise rates again. Politically, the effect would be, oh, my gosh. Because what you're trying to do is slow the economy. And what that looks like is higher unemployment. And you kidding me? We're halfway through March. You can't raise interest rates this year. Now, maybe in December, after the election. There's no way, but look, they're not serious about it. Powell hasn't been serious from the beginning. It's just they thought they could do this balance and not have, they call it the soft landing. Doing hard things rarely includes a soft landing. Well, it's long term. I wouldn't call it a soft landing, but you're on solid ground. You got sure footing, but it's because you did what was necessary. But they don't want to do that.
Well,
it's hard.
Yeah, but they use soft landing, saying we're not in a recession.
Well, but the soft landing is to have that balance between, the inflation and the recession and not have that recession
Right.
come in hard.
Right, which was my point. Yeah.
There is no soft landing when you
Right.
do it right. It needs to come in with higher unemployment, and it often looks like a recession.
Yeah, my
it
point was
is a recession.
when they say soft landing, they mean not a recession, while they ignore the fact that inflation is still out of control.
Yeah.
And so the consumer, I don't care. The consumer doesn't care. When you sit there and go, well, soft landing means no recession. No, it also means extended inflation over the years, because it doesn't matter. And when the economists bring all these numbers up, and you saw, if you were watching KGP this week, she was talking about it. You would have thought that inflation has been defeated.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite by the time we get to Friday. And we're not in a recession. We're not in a recession. Yeah, but you cannot get rid of this inflation. And that's what people are responding to. We talked about the polling that was done on it, while Biden's saying, well, the unemployment, and people, as we said, and we said this the long time ago, that inflation is worse than a recession.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing this administration doesn't seem to recognize, because inflation hits everybody all the time. Yeah. Everybody. And if you can't keep it under control, you have the situation that you have now. And you can sit there and you can talk about the unemployment. You can talk about the numbers, core CPI. It doesn't matter. You can talk about, well, these products are low. When you see the products that people buy, that they need, well, those are the prices that are 20 to 25% more than they were 3 years ago.
Right.
And continue to go up.
And keep in mind, if you're doing it right, things are still going to go up at a 2% rate. Prices will still go up at an average of a 2% rate.
On the inflated amount over the last few years, too.
Exactly.
Right.
On top of where they are now. Prices will go up still if you're doing it right, and they have no intention of doing it right.
866-90 Red Eye.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. It's not always easy to spring back from the harsh days of winter to warmer months ahead. From de-icing chemicals to hidden debris underneath snow and ice, winter conditions can do serious damage to your truck. Here's a must-do maintenance check to help you minimize downtime and stay rolling. Have your wheel alignment checked to set you up for a safer and smoother ride. Driving with incorrect wheel alignment can result in reduced performance, tread wear, and steering issues. While you're at it, make sure your tires are properly inflated based on the load you're hauling. Underinflated tires can impact your fuel economy and result in blowouts.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up on the show, Chuck Schumer officially takes the side of the terrorists.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer's pro-terrorist speech yesterday.
Right.
I did read, I forgot who wrote it, said, oh, he seems to be backing off it. I didn't see any story that he was backing off on it. Just somebody on Twitter said after 4 hours after he said it, he seems to be walking it back.
I didn't see any follow-up statement.
Right.
But
neither did I, but it was just, not surprising.
No.
We knew the Democrats and the Democrat leadership would eventually go this way. Yeah. But it's absolutely reprehensible. It's so evil.
It defies logic.
It really does. So we'll get to that. This is a really interesting story. The health agency out of Australia is saying there's no such thing as long COVID. That any of these things that are happening are just regular viruses that people get.
Yeah, there's long effects of COVID, long-lasting effects of COVID, but long COVID is different, yeah.
$866-90 Red Eye. Now's your chance to be the caller. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I do want to play this audio cut.
All right.
On Fox News yesterday, Senator Kennedy from Louisiana on and talking about the producer price index that was released. Now, there's some good information in here, but I just find it entertaining because he's on a roll. Here we go.
Senator, the numbers are not going in the right direction.
Well, I'm disappointed. I can't say that I'm surprised, Steve. Look, President Biden is an inflation machine. And you know, we talk about the CPI and the PPI and the NBA and the NFL. The average American doesn't have time to stop and research this. All they know, let me give you a concrete example. My people in Louisiana, median household income $55,000 a year. Yep. President Biden's inflation is costing them an extra $10,000 a year, and they don't have it.
No kidding.
This was predictable. You can't print, borrow, and spend the kind of money that President Biden has without causing inflation. And I don't know why his colleagues at the White House didn't tell him that.
Yeah.
Some days I think the Biden White House would lower the average IQ of an entire city. I mean, this is really basic economics 101.
And that's something that you and I have said over and over again, and that's why the Obama economist warned him, don't do this.
Right.
Don't do what you're doing. Don't do it.
Right.
You're going to cause the inflation. And so all of this is predictable. And then when you see, for example, the president coming out with a $7.3 trillion budget, up $1.1 trillion in just 2 years.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that we're cutting spending because COVID is over. We're drastically increasing. Now, it's dead in the water, but it just shows you the fact that they really don't care about inflation. They don't.
Right. No, there is no concern with them. In a couple of ways. They really don't care what your spending power is. But beyond that, they know if they acknowledge inflation in any way and they're to change what they're doing, then politically they get hammered for it. I mean, they're just not going to win. So, and the only game the Democrats have left anymore is spending. The only thing where the American people aren't screaming at them, they're screaming at them on the border. Ironically, they're screaming at them on inflation, but but then at the same time, the people who are screaming are saying, yeah, but don't cut any of my programs. We don't need to be cutting our spending. So on the spending part of it, they can keep going because we let them. The American people, and I don't mean our audience, I don't mean conservatives, I mean people, the American people. There is not an uproar on spending, on the national debt. That hasn't happened. We're very worried about inflation, but for some reason we've unlinked the two. At one point, remember, during the expanded child tax credit period, at the end of that, the American people in the polls showed, we pretty much know we can't continue that. But when you're underwater, you will climb on top of anyone to keep from drowning. And that's where the American people are in terms of their spending power now and what's happening with inflation.
And then you see Bernie Sanders yesterday coming out with the 32-hour work week.
Gosh.
And you're like, wow, they just want to skyrocket inflation.
This will cost everybody.
It's interesting when they talk about the pilot projects where people are more that people are more efficient or productive for 32 hours than they are 40 hours.
Right, yeah.
Well, that may be in certain salary jobs but when you talk about the fact that the service industry is bigger than it's ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do some research here to find the percentage of salary jobs versus the salary of hourly jobs. But if you make it 32 hours per week, and that's all people have to work, then you have to hire 20% more employees.
Yep.
Or you have to pay for those 8 hours time and a half.
Right.
And so your
Right.
costs go
Right.
up drastically because in the service sector, it's not just about, well, everything is about productivity, but the fact is there's hours that have to be
They have to be filled. Yep.
You've got to fill them somehow. Now, I will say this. I did look at Eric and say, wow, if they're cutting back, because it would be cutting back 20% of the time. I said, do we get do we only have to do four shows a week then? We
No.
get a 3-day weekend. I was getting
No.
all excited about this. And
No.
Eric said, no, because all they count for us is the fact that we work 5 hours a day on the air, 5 days a week, which is 25 hours. He said,
means,
so what they're going to do for us is have us work Saturday and Sunday too.
Yeah,
This
right.
would help it. So we would actually have
Right.
to work 7 days a week.
Right, exactly. And that's just written in there for, but it's not music radio. It's only, oddly enough, it's only a conservative talk radio host that have to do it. Ben Shapiro's not going to be happy. I'll just say that.
Well,
He'll never be able to retire.
well, explain what you're talking about because people have no idea what you're talking about. And
They don't? Oh, okay.
Why you brought up Ben. No.
All right.
Well,
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. I wasn't aware of that because it was a pretty big story on social media. But if you're not on social media, for those under the age of, or over the age of whatever, no, he was going off on the other day on retirement and Social Security and everything else. It's the point wasn't to try and get into that, but he had some back and forth on social media, and he made some points. Quite frankly, I got tired of following it.
Well, we'll talk about it later on because I thought it was really interesting because he and Matt Walsh were talking about the fact that, we're talking about the reality of Social Security, but the trolls were just hitting big time, and they were arguing back and forth, to the point where people were questioning, you've never worked a day in your life. Mm-hmm. And what he was saying is Social Security has to go. It's a Ponzi scheme. And he's
it has been from the beginning, but we've
right.
that ship has already sailed.
Yeah,
and so it's quite unfortunate we're in this position.
But then he also got into the fact that he's never going to retire.
Well,
and we shouldn't, and healthy people shouldn't retire at 65, and that, and that's what your point was when you said Ben Shapiro's never going to be able to retire.
That's what he got hit on,
right?
The people, basically shouldn't be paying you to retire if you're healthy. Well, the fact of the matter is that we set this Ponzi scheme up years ago. I agree, it's a Ponzi scheme. The road to privatizing all of that now? No. Because you have to hand it to Congress and tell me what it looks like when it comes out of, the meat factory on Capitol Hill. It would be insane. And then you have to rely on people because we built out the pathology of dependency. But that also includes this idea, that if I go broke, even if I have something now, if I go broke, the government will help me out. Not Social Security, they'll help me out with other programs. So if we turned it to privatize it, which a lot of us supported for a long, long time, and I still support it, it's not realistic because people would take, let's just say they did a one-time settlement, right? And said, okay, you can take this and then you can put it into your 401k. You can do whatever you want. It's a lump sum. Well, for many people, because of the pathology of dependency, that money would be gone, and then all of a sudden they'd be collecting welfare, they'd be collecting other government programs, and that's just the nature of where we are from building this out for such a long time. It's quite unfortunate.
And we'll
I agree on neither one. You're way past retirement age, so did I stress way too much? I feel like I look in some ways way past retirement age. I don't like that idea of retiring. I don't like that idea of sitting still. Even working nights when I'm awake during the day, I don't like sitting around. I like doing things. It just makes me feel, for some reason, it makes me feel like I'm just, being a bum if I actually take some time and don't do anything for a few days.
It's completely different from where I was 20 years ago mentally. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. I want to make sure we finish here with the Bernie Sanders plan, just so people can put it in perspective. And this was Business News Daily in 2021. 55.8% of all workers received an hourly wage rather than salary. Workstream says that now in 2023, it was 58.1% of workers in the U.S. Are hourly. The other 41.9% make up the salaried workforce. But the thing is, because that's how they're trying to promote it, that in these pilot programs that when people work 32 hours a week, they were more productive. Now, were they more productive than they would be for 40 hours? But that really doesn't matter. What matters is so much of the service industry, and again, when we talk about everything is on-time delivery, people are working, you got to cover 24 hours now. We talked yesterday about Amazon delivering between 4 and 8 a.m. We get home in the morning going, who the hell's that in my driveway? Oh, it's just the Amazon guy. And so you've got to fill those hours. So much of the service industry is hours that have to be filled. You can't sit there and say, all right, just using, for example, air traffic controllers, you only work a 32-hour work week, and they're more productive. Well, what does that mean? Planes aren't crashing. But the fact is you've got to fill that 20% more hours, and they're having problems getting people already. And in the workforce right now, if you're going to need 60% of the workforce that is hourly, because they need to fill that time. It's not just about productivity. There's time that has to be filled. And let's say out of the 60% that you have, and by the way, I do think that you'll have companies try to make people salaried. That's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Because
that's what actually one of the first things that will happen.
And but let's say it's just 30% of the workforce, but still 30% of the workforce having to hire 20% more employees in this time right now will make inflation worse. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the demand means productivity has to be high. The demand for goods and services means that we have to have people. And it used to be, I mean, pre-COVID, you had retail going 24/7. That's not so much the case now, but the delivery part of it is the supply chain is 24/7. This is something that, by the way, safety advocates, so-called safety advocates, were trying to push the trucking industry into an 8-to-5 job. Drivers would love to be 8 to 5, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, realistically, traffic, number one, it's not going to be very productive. And number two, you're looking at a supply chain that would just crumble. I mean, it would just and so all the other roles within the supply chain and as you mentioned, the service industry would crumble. I mean, doors would have to be closed because we're not going to afford another 20% labor cost on top of everything else that's driving costs up.
Well, when I was a machinist, if I worked 32 hours and not 40 hours, I would not have been more productive.
Right.
Feeds and speeds on a lathe, for example,
right,
or even in grinding.
Yep.
That's a certain feed and speed.
Yep.
I mean, that's what it is.
One of my brothers is in that right now.
And you can't change that.
Right.
So you talk about where these pilot projects were done. Well, where were the pilot projects done?
Right.
Were they done in sales? Were they done in...
And how do they extrapolate out long term?
Right.
Because we settle into it, and in 32 hours, it's like, oh, I don't want to work 32. How about just 24? Right?
Yep. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. And you see the insanity at the border, and then you've got the Pentagon chief yesterday talking about the alarming number of drone incursions at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just when you and there seems to be a complete disconnect, with the administration. There you've got the military saying we're extremely concerned what's going on. It's insane what's going on at the border.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's just amazing.
Yeah. It's the only thing you can do. Just deny.
Bonnie Willis' decision is supposed to come down later on today.
Yeah.
And in fact, the judge said it. He said yesterday,
Yeah.
So it's coming down
Right.
today. So.
Mm-hmm.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here. He's Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara.
Hi.
We're here on a Friday. Man, some nasty weather across the country.
Wow.
We didn't get it. I got no rain. They kept moving it back, but
Up in Collin County, which is the northeastern quadrant of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, North Texas area, they got a supercell up there late afternoon, early evening. Wow.
Yeah,
massive hail, tornadoes.
Massive hail. And then you had the at least I know the one tornado that they talked about hit the trailer park. That was they called it a mass casualty event. I haven't seen any update on that. We'll look that for you, but it stretches all the way up to western Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah,
from Texas all the way up there. So what a huge system that is. But we'll keep you updated. Eric, I thought this was really interesting. All right, I saw this on Twitter. You really haven't I haven't seen anybody bring this up. I'm assuming you're going to see in conservative media more talk about this, but this is what happened yesterday. The media seemed to be focused on the fact that the Judge Cannon yesterday said, well, on one issue, you're going to have to let the jury decide, even though she has questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
But that wasn't the point. This is really interesting, and it's from Julie Kelly, who works for Real Clear Investigations. There's Real Clear Politics, whatever.
Right.
And she said, from the Florida courthouse in Trump's classified documents case, with a prediction, the Robert Hur report and testimony is the biggest elephant in the room. Now, you and I have talked about the fact that judges many times don't live in a bubble. They look and go, okay, what's happening, over here?
Right.
Cannon hammered the fact that no former president or vice president has been charged under the Espionage Act for taking and keeping classified records, including national defense information, which represents 32 counts against Trump in Jack Smith's indictment. Now, her prediction, Cannon will not dismiss the case based on the motions debated today, the vagueness of the Espionage Act and protection under the Presidential Records Act, but it is very likely she will dismiss the case based on selective prosecution, a motion that's still pending before her. Now, you didn't see any of the media talk about this yesterday. And so I thought this was really interesting. And I've seen her stuff. A lot of times I agree with her. Sometimes I don't. But I think this is an interesting point that she brings up. Cannon pressed both the defense and the special counsel to explain when the crime of willful retention of national defense information begins. She noted the date in Jack Smith's indictment as to when Trump first violated the Espionage Act. January 20th, 2021, the day he left office. Jay Bratt, representing the special counsel's office, confirmed the crime began that day because as a former president, he was not entitled to retain the documents. Let me just see here. Cannon again asked for historical precedent as to when a former vice president, as to when a former president or vice president faced charges for similar conduct. Brad, of course, said it's never happened. She added vice president on numerous occasions for a reason. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Mike Pence all skated on criminal charges. Trump is the only one who has not. Cannon said arbitrary enforcement is featuring in this case. Cannon also addressed the foreseeability as to Trump's awareness he was committing a crime by keeping classified national defense information, given the constellation of what happened before, meaning no criminal prosecution ever of former presidents, including Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, and vice presidents. Cannon suggested Trump could have reasonably expected to believe he was in the clear. This is really interesting.
Wow.
Also of interest, Jay Bratt claiming there is no official process for the president to obtain or keep a security clearance. His argument is Trump's clearance automatically expired at the end of his term, which contradicts how former government officials maintain clearances long after their service ended. Trump's elimination of John Brennan's clearance was raised, but there's a problem. The Department of Energy, learning of Smith's indictment against Trump in the summer of 2023, retroactively revoked Trump's Q security clearance. Brett says the government has emails and a draft memo to revoke Trump's clearance. Cannon's counter-argument is, but if there is no formal process for authorizing or removing a president's security clearance, why did the Department of Energy need to memorialize it post-indictment? Bratt did not have an answer. Fascinating stuff.
Wow.
What she's saying is this is selective prosecution.
Yeah, right.
And they write here, Obama told NARA he was taking all 30 million of his documents and the Obama Foundation would control his records and the digitizing of it, which still hasn't happened. No raids, no questions asked, nothing. And so when you look at this here, because if this would be the point of why the entire case might be dropped. Because you hear these stating, well, the Espionage Act has to be dropped. Well, if you drop the Espionage Act charges against him, what is the obstruction of justice over?
Right.
If they're saying it's selective prosecution, because look, the president is treated differently than Joe. That Joe Biden wasn't charged. Whatever the reason, Joe Biden wasn't charged. No president, Reagan, no president has been charged. But then again, when you have Hillary Clinton, she wasn't a president. She wasn't a vice president.
Right.
You got, Joe Biden. All these things happened. He was vice president, but you don't have the same security clearance, and the same thing with Mike Pence. So she's asking, why have nobody else ever been prosecuted except Trump? And it does get to the point in the federal courts where they look at this and say the president is different, and people even in high office, because the Department of Justice hasn't charged people below the level of president that do not have the same courtesies that are extended to presidents even after, because no president's ever been charged. Well, you're going after Trump. So the Espionage Act thing goes away. Well, if the Espionage Act goes away, what is the obstruction of justice over?
Yeah, if the statute doesn't apply, then
does the whole thing fall apart because you're doing obstruction of justice on a president where you've never done them? If you've never done the Espionage Act on any president, and Hillary skated, right?
Yeah.
Hillary skated, Joe Biden skated, and Joe Biden's skating on stuff when he wasn't president.
Right. There was zero excuse for him to have those documents at any moment outside the skip room.
And
some of those documents.
And so you're looking and saying, yeah, we know what people say, that you're not supposed to have them, but everybody else wasn't supposed to have them either, and there was never any prosecution. And we're talking about a president leaving office that has so many top secret documents that this is something. It's basically the thing we've always made, that everything's always been negotiated. Well, if you've never charged, if there's no Espionage Act violation and the judge kicks that out, what is the obstruction of justice over?
Right, because even on each crime, espionage, a violation of the Espionage Act and obstruction have to have an intent. Well, what's the intent behind obstruction then? If espionage doesn't apply.
And then you
the
look
Espionage Act.
And then you look and you say, after all these presidents, none of them were ever charged, only Trump.
Right.
That's the point she's making. It's a good point. I just didn't think judges, you could find a federal judge who would actually look at that and say, well, this is selective prosecution. Because you talk about, well, a lot of people have been selectively prosecuted and been found guilty, but does the federal judiciary look at this and say, but when it comes to top secret stuff, a president and the transition is completely different than any other human being in the United States.
And it has been from the beginning of time.
Right. And that's how the Justice Department has treated it all this time. And you're doing this as a part of election interference.
Right.
Because you can make that point.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be done as part of election interference because you could have brought these charges back a while ago, and you're bringing it right now, and you want it before the election in order to change the outcome of the election.
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And if it goes up to and then it's like, okay, you're going to appeal it. Well, it goes to the Supreme Court. This thing is over.
Oh, it's over, yeah.
It's over because it won't affect the election, number one, and it's probably over because the Supreme Court would probably, it might be a 4-3 or 4-3.
2 recusals.
it might be a 5-4 vote.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, you're talking about the presidency, which is different than any other citizen in the United States.
Right.
And
the back and forth negotiation.
Yep.
That has happened. Line out for me also all the other presidents. We bring the examples of Mike Pence and Hillary and Biden, and none of them were president in terms of the relationship to the documents. So at that time, none were president. So now let's go back to the other presidents and how the process happened there.
Right.
And you could go back to the Trump's predecessor, Obama. Well, tell me what that process was back and forth. Tell me why the Department of Justice didn't seek action on any of those items. Because if there's a negotiation, the back and forth, hey, we want this, we want this, we want this. If there's no statute that applies here that says a president must do this with these documents, has this amount of time to do this, then it is all. And the reason there is no statute here is because because of the clearance that a president has. And you can say, well, but he shouldn't be keeping those documents. That's not the point. Tell me what the basis is for the charge.
And I think she probably looks at because it's like you're looking at the her hearings the other day, And as we have stated, the one thing where it's like, well, we made the decision that because he would be sympathetic because he was an elderly old man that didn't remember anything. And we're like, well, yeah, he does. And I don't think anybody brought this up as a Republican going, wait a minute, every day he's out there stating, I didn't do any of these things.
Right.
And all of a sudden he gets in the deposition and forgets everything.
Right.
And that's how you let him skate?
Right. And we're told by all of his surrogates he has no memory issues?
No memory issues at all.
Right.
And that was the part, as we stated yesterday, was so bogus. We'll talk more about this because this is fascinating. And I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's fascinating to see that she is asking those questions. And if she's asking those questions when this eventually gets to the Supreme Court, but they don't care about that. They just want to convict him now so he loses the election.
Right, right. But I think
they actually don't care about the appeal. But I bet you she's looking at it going, well, wait a minute. This isn't like, because they may bring up, well, there's selective prosecution. Some people get charged with stealing, and some other people steal for the first time or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so selective prosecution is constitutional. And her response probably would be, not at this level with the President of the United States,
right,
with the stakes at hand when it comes to interfering with a presidential election.
Right. The details of how these cases, all of them, could collapse are fascinating all day. We know the motive. All of us know the motivation. You're trying to influence the election in every case.
Yep. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Owner-operators can save a hefty amount of money by participating in discount fuel networks. If you're leased and your fleet has a fuel optimizer program, use it. Such a program helps plan a trip based on fuel prices and locations in the carrier's fuel network. The larger the carrier, typically the larger the discounts that are possible. Fees for using such networks have become rare thanks to competition for drivers. Owner-operators are well advised, however, to pass up network fuel stops that are too costly, are too far off route, sell inferior fuel, or are dangerously or poorly maintained. For independent owner-operators, a bevy of fuel discount networks exists, from a variety of traditional fuel cards to the National Association of Small Trucking Companies network and the younger mudflap applications discounts at independent truck stops around the nation. Research the options and discounts available to find the right one for you. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, and it's so interesting because I think what Judge Cannon also, you know, after the Robert Hur thing is all the allegations, you know, all the things that Robert Hur said where Biden broke the law, he wasn't president. So there really is no negotiations if you're not president. The vice president or a senator doesn't negotiate with anyone as to whether something is top secret or not. They're not even involved in it at all.
Right.
And so using it, and I'm sure the defense is going to pound, you know, on this now even more because Biden, he skates. Hillary, she skates.
Right.
And think about the similarities. Both said, well, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute, and then, well, no prosecutor will bring this up because he might not win. And
exactly.
we said, well, that's not. All you simply look at is what is the crime,
right?
And when it comes, and she makes a point, when it comes to the relationship of a president and the National Archives on secrets, there is no standard,
right? What
there
are you,
is
what
no
are
standard
you building your legal case on? The number of items along the way that you're building this legal case on. This really comes down to when we're talking about a president and using those other examples, is key because they weren't president.
Right.
When you're negotiating back and forth with a former president, there are certain things that you're just going to have to allow. And that's just the way it's going to be. I don't care if it's Obama. I don't care if it's Trump. It doesn't matter who the former president is. That's how you treat the office itself. Even when they're former president. When they're a former president. It's so clear. When you break this thing down, wow. The motivation here can't be denied.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Really interesting when you look at what we've been talking about here. And it was Julie Kelly from Real Clear Investigations, which is all part of Real Clear Politics, who brought up what she thinks, she brought up what was going on in the courtroom yesterday on the classified documents case. And she said, just to go over it again in case you just tuned in, as I mentioned today, I think based on Judge Cannon's references to arbitrary enforcement and the lack of historical precedent in charging presidents, vice presidents with the Espionage Act, she is likely to dismiss the case on selective prosecution grounds. What is very interesting is Jack Smith filed his opposition to Trump's motion to dismiss on selective vindictive prosecution grounds, but before Trump has actually filed the actual motion on the docket. The motion was emailed to Judge Cannon, which means she has already read it. The deadline was 2 weeks after her report released, but before the congressional testimony this week. And her point is that one of her points is that when you look at what is going on here overall, that she's paying attention to her case.
Right.
And one of the things, as we've gone over, that she was saying is, well, when did the crime begin? When did the Espionage Act crime begin? When did former President Trump break the Espionage Act? And they said January 20th. So he was breaking the law on January 20th. You've never charged any president ever with having top secret defense materials, which they've had.
Right.
The day they're out of office.
Right.
That's never happened. She brought that up. I mean, that's why she said, what day did the crime begin? January 20th. It's like, well, that's selective prosecution. You've never gone after it. And because you never have, what is the standard for the crime?
Right.
And is what she was asking. And it's like, they really don't have an answer for what the standard is for the crime. And you're probably not going to get away with the federal judge saying, well, it's not normally, but Trump, it is.
Yeah.
Probably.
We all know he's a criminal. I mean, there's just nowhere to go with this. On the merits, when you start breaking it down, this is the great thing about these great legal minds. When they start breaking these things down, it's like, well, hold on a second. The judge in the Georgia case the other day. You didn't build on the items that were dismissed. You didn't build out the crimes. You didn't build out the charges here. So the defense has nothing to go. They don't know what to defend. But when you look at it, though, you can see, and I think that judge in Georgia made the point, we know what is a crime, but on these items, tell us what actions basically build out how this crime was committed. by those who are alleged to have done it. Well, this comes down to one thing: get Trump. This seriously is going to be. It's got to be a movie somewhere or a series. Get Trump. You know, with everything
it's already a book.
Yeah, exactly.
Dershowitz's book.
Yeah, well, Dershowitz's book, A Ball of Collusion, by Andrew McCarthy. All of these things, but think about it. If you put all of these characters and everything, you would need, basically, you're going to need a 20-year series. It's going to have to be, or as long as Law and Order, in order to fully depict everything that's gone on here. And we've never seen anything like this. The morning of the Mar-a-Lago raid, this is honestly, I think in so many ways, these activists at the DOJ or on the state level, the attorney generals that are acting, or local prosecutors that are acting on these items, it's the mindset that I've talked about on the left, where they think they have won forever, that they're not going to be, even on legal matters, they're not going to be called out on it. And they overplayed their hand. They did a raid on a residence of a former president on documents. Tell me why that was necessary to do that raid in that way. And then remember, it took a few days for Merrick Garland to come out, and then, he comes out with his, pounding his chest. This was all me. I made the call to do this, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we know.
And as without this is Julie Kelly's reporting from yesterday, without saying so directly, what Judge Cannon suggested is that any former president or vice president who took authorized records and failed to return them to the proper authority committed a crime the day that he left office. Also important to note that Judge Cannon, who was pretty measured in comparison to most judges, made these points in a rather heated fashion. She is very aware of the double standard at play in the non-prosecution of, Joe Biden. And as she wrote, the Robert Hur report and testimony is the biggest elephant in the room. The term arbitrary enforcement used frequently by both the defense and Judge Cannon. Cannon then hammered the fact that no former president or vice president has been charged under the Espionage Act for taking and keeping classified records, including national defense information, which represents 32 counts against Trump in Jack Smith's indictment. And we went through that before, but I just wanted to, in case somebody just tuned in, right now, she pressed both defense and special counsel to explain when the crime of willful retention of national defense information begins. She noted the date on Jack Smith's indictment as to when Trump first violated the Espionage Act was January 20th, 2021. And the thing is, when you look at this, if there is no Espionage Act, you say, okay, is there still obstruction of justice?
Right.
Because most people believe the Espionage Act is completely bogus. Well, you can make the case that, okay, if there is no espionage, if the Espionage Act was not violated because it's selective prosecution, and the Department of Justice, by how they have treated everybody else, even those people that have never been president of the United States, means that when it comes to the president of the United States, and nobody's ever even been charged except Trump in it, that the process is not clear. And if the process is not clear, my next point would be here, and I'm reading into what she's saying with the judge, but if it's a negotiation, when does actually a criminal investigation begin? Because this isn't the same thing as a normal criminal investigation.
Right.
The FBI raided it, but the fact is, this is, and history shows, it's always been a negotiation, back and forth. And if the Department of Justice is not going to charge non-presidents for having top secret data by giving them some kind of excuse, well, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute Hillary Clinton, then what you're saying is you've set the precedent that the Department of Justice does not prosecute in this case. They negotiate.
Right.
So that the presidential the archives, National Archives, negotiates this. That's been the process, and it can go on for a significant period of time because there is in the law no time frame for that.
Right. And if it's a process, then how do you get to obstruction? If it is a negotiation process, which it is, then how do you get? Because where is it? Where's the directive or the order that said, okay, officially this is an investigation? It could be somewhere. At some point, Merrick Garland said, okay, let's start this and document everything.
But the point back would be you've never done that with anybody else at any time.
Yeah,
and
I know.
when does it say in the law that an investigation begins at this point?
Right.
Where is that in the law that the investigation begins at this particular point for a president? And therefore, if the president still resists because he believes it's a negotiation, because that's the process that's always been done, and there is no time limit on it, how can you charge him with obstruction?
And my point goes to the answer of when did the crime start? Well, the crime started January 20th of 2021. Yeah, but when did the investigation start? I mean, it's because to build this out, they have to make it look like legit. It's not a negotiation. And it always has been a negotiation.
But I do think, and when you think about it, Robert Hur not doing it may change this. May not suggesting charging Biden on it, who was not president when all this happened,
right,
and does not have the same. He's not under the same law.
Right.
That the fact is, if you're not, and the point I would look at if I'm a judge, as we said yesterday. They're saying Hur is saying, well, he basically doesn't have the mental capability to stand trial, and jurors would feel sorry for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, well, that's not the call. If you want to say, well, look, this person is legally insane, well, then defense should do that.
Right.
Prosecution doing it, well, no. Prosecution should simply say, is there been a crime committed? Yeah, this is a crime. This is what we're going to go after. Because it's clear the crime was committed.
Right.
And what you're saying is the jury would feel sympathetic towards a senile old man.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point they're communicating. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, that's up for the defense to do that. So there is no, for you and me, it's the same thing as a vice president or a senator. If you've got the top secret materials, the day the moment you have them in your hands and you're not authorized to have them, you broke the law.
Right.
But the law isn't the same for the president based on the fact of how the Department of Justice has acted. And it's not, again, how they have acted shows how they view, because that's also precedent is on this level is how has the Department of Justice viewed all other presidents? All right, let's look at levels before, people that don't have the same status as a president when it comes to top secret materials,
right,
and the negotiation process. There is no negotiation if you're not president. That doesn't exist.
Right.
You're guilty day one. Joe Biden gets off on it. For 40 years, he's had top secret documents and top secret national defense documents, and you know it, and you've got the evidence to prove it, and you've got him on tape and the transcript stating that he knows he has it. Mm-hmm. He's out there publicly stating, I've done nothing wrong. He's got a great memory when he's not doing a deposition. And in the deposition, he says he doesn't know anything about anything.
Right.
But the next day, he'll be out there screaming, I didn't do this. This is false. This never happened.
Right.
Well, if I'm the judge looking at this and I'm going, well, this is a president of the United States. Folks, this is a different ball game here. And this is election interference is what's going on. Everything gone.
Well, it's selective prosecution on a non-crime.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I think that's where, it looks like that's where Cannon, according to Julie Kelly, is actually headed.
Right.
And,
Based on the questions.
right,
she had.
because I looked at this and I thought Trump would be most vulnerable because I just didn't think they would bring up selective prosecution. I just didn't think they would.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes total sense, especially when you're talking about a president of the United States. And the fact is, and you can look at this too, and you can look at just across the board of the Department of Justice and go, these people, you've seen what happened to Hunter Biden, how they wanted him to skate.
Mm-hmm. Just
Just across the board, you're looking, you go, this Department of Justice is politicized.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, you may not bring Hunter Biden into it, but don't tell me that doesn't influence you
Oh, yeah.
as a judge.
Right.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. That's like I said, that's fascinating about Judge Cannon. We'll see what happens in the classified documents case where that will actually where that will go. But I just
right.
didn't think any judge would bring up selective prosecution. I just did, except if you got to the Supreme Court. I just didn't think a federal judge would do that. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
and again, she hasn't done it yet, but she's brought it up as an issue.
Right.
Selective prosecution.
Yeah.
And that's because they filed that motion
Right.
for it. So and it's like she's paying attention to the Her case.
Yeah. Well, when you put everything into perspective, it all comes into play. It's like, okay, what's the legal basis of all of this?
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. He's Eric Harley. Good morning.
Happy Friday. Some breaking news. This early Friday morning, Gary RFK Jr. has announced he's changed his mind. He's now considering Brett Favre and Hulk Hogan. Brother.
Well, you saw the whole thing yesterday with Aaron Rodgers, who denied and then that he ever talked about it being a hoax.
Sandy Hook, right? Yeah.
Sandy Hook, yeah.
Mm.
And there's been, audio and video of him stating that.
Mm.
And the response back was, well, it wasn't that you called it a hoax. It's that the CNN reporter is claiming that you were talking conspiracy theories about who did it in a government cover-up. But all you have is that CNN reporter. There is no evidence that's been produced that he ever said that.
Mm. Right.
And that's why we asked yesterday when we told you about the story and said, look, he hasn't responded yet. We'll see how he responded. He responded and said
right.
no.
Yeah.
So there's two things, but there's obviously, from what you can see, he didn't call it a hoax. The second, they claim the allegation was he was saying it was a conspiracy theory that the government or something did
Right.
it. But there's no
Right.
evidence of that. No evidence has been brought forward except
That he said that.
right.
Yeah.
And then I saw one of the political analysts said, well, if he runs, if he runs as vice president, he takes votes from Trump if it's Aaron Rodgers because of his vaccine opinion when Trump has been going in the opposite direction, promoting the fact of, the vaccine and how much it helped, the elderly out there, how many lives it saved, and that he got it as quickly to the market. He's actually bringing that up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the immediate. I don't think that matters to people anymore. They're going to vote for Trump. I just don't.
Yeah,
I don't think this. I would disagree.
I think it's a wash because I think people have already made up their mind on the vaccine thing in terms of whether it was right or wrong, whether they're good or bad. Vaccines in general. I mean, for a lot of people, they did extrapolate it out and said, "Well, I don't trust any vaccine."
Right.
So it's such a huge thing, but it gets down to the individual's practice in their life and how they're going to approach that themselves, and really not about what happened. I just think the whole COVID thing, aside from the massive spending that the current administration did, was, it's already a known, or it's already priced in. It's already,
right.
in that equation, and it's not going to move much.
But I love how we become a society where it's all or none.
Yeah, right.
As we have stated, young people did not need the vaccine.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The vaccine mandate was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that has stayed the same, because you're right, it's gotten to the point, well, all vaccines are bad.
Right, yeah. Right.
No matter what it is, all vaccines are bad.
Right.
Well, all vaccines have side effects, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has a side effect to it.
Sure.
That hasn't stopped Americans from doing prescription drugs, has it?
Nope.
At all. And sometimes when we sit there and we see the side effects, and reading the side effects is actually longer for the longer part of the commercial than actually what it does to you. And when you hear some of the side effects, you're like, I'd rather have the disease.
Yeah, I know legally they have to give the disclaimer. Put it somewhere else. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Well, but one thing that has remained the same, because you will have people out there saying, well, the vaccines did no good at all, which is false.
Yeah, right.
It did. And the elderly and those with elderly and underlying conditions were the ones much more susceptible to COVID, that had a high kill rate at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But on the opposite end, for children and healthy people, most never needed the vaccine.
Right.
Based on odds.
Yeah, right.
What are the odds you'll die from it? And when you were younger, it's less than the flu.
Well, like with all things COVID, it was heavily politicized, and the opportunity to do that came from the fear that was built surrounding COVID from the very beginning.
There was, I don't even know who posted it yesterday, but it was a Trump tweet from I think it was March 20th. I'm doing this from memory. March 20th of 2020. And it was Donald Trump, and it said, social distancing.
Right. That was the entire tweet. Yeah.
Yeah. Social distancing. It was like, you're talking March of 2020 when nobody really knew what was going on.
It's because there were a number of things. Here in the States, the multiple deaths under one roof in Washington State at a nursing home was very scary for a lot of people, because while I think we probably factored in, all of us laymen factored in the fact that these are elderly people, beyond that, the question became, okay, but how deadly is this thing? And those questions, or the fact that they didn't know a lot about it at that time, then turned into politicizing it for, well, it's got to be this. But I'd say that first summer, because you didn't see, you could see trends, but they weren't long-term trends, and then you started seeing, okay, look, children, they fare well. The elder, it's like with any other type of virus in this setting, who's susceptible. And it's always, and it has been, your parents, my parents, Well, during flu season, we stay home more. We carry the gel along with us if we go out or whatever it is. Those practices have been common for a long, long time. But then the reporting also and sensationalizing it. But then you started seeing the fissures, the cracks in the ice. You know,
Well,
the governor of California, you need to not be social distancing is the law. And then, of course, he's at a dinner party, no masks, sitting practically on the laps of other people.
But I don't think putting Aaron Rodgers is going to move anything for Trump at all.
No.
And I will say this: you knew from the beginning. We talk about the things that remain consistent, and there were a lot of things that weren't. The masks was complete BS. Social distancing, we found out, was BS. Keeping children out of school, and that's when it became immoral and evil. Right, is when you kept children out of school for a long time, and from the very beginning, we knew, and that hasn't changed. That children were not affected like the elderly. And the elderly with underlying conditions. We knew that. Yeah. And so when they were doing the stupid things, because it was by the summer, because kids were outside, and it was like, remember here, even here in Texas, was it Dallas County or whatever that said no more than 4 kids playing together at the same time, which was the dumbest rule, as we had stated back then, just knowing viruses in general. If you keep people in their homes in a very close quarters, the nursing home, we knew that.
Yeah.
And then people still have to go to work, so you've got one family member, 2 family members going to work, and people still go about, and then they are in this closed, confined place. Odds are you're going to spread it real quick.
Yeah.
If kids are outside doing stuff, they're not inside where the virus would spread faster. That's when it got down to being really immoral at that point, because you knew. And then even 2 years later, the teachers union still didn't want kids back in school.
Right.
And that was obscene. And then the teachers union tries to back off on it.
Right.
Oh, no, we weren't for that. Yes, you were. Shut up. And they couldn't win that one. It was best. And she did, Randy Weingarten finally just shut up on it because she couldn't win that one.
Yeah, it's a matter of record.
Yeah, it's like. Well,
we were all here for it.
But it will be. It seems like, I don't know why, but it just seems like it'll be Aaron Rodgers, not that he'll announce will be his vice presidential pick, and I don't think that moves the needle at all. At all.
Yeah, I don't think it. I don't think it does anything.
I will say this, though: the polls coming out still show that Trump is doing very, very well in the swing states. I think the latest polls over the last 36 hours. He's winning in every state.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get worse. You see Biden out there yesterday? He was outside. He turned to his staff. Can I take any questions? And somebody there in a Biden shirt said, well, yeah, you can. And then all the people ran down, all of his aides pushing the reporters back.
That's ushered them out.
Yeah, it was bad. It really looked bad.
It was horrible.
And he was, one time, and it was a long-distance camera, but he looked completely confused. Was a reporter screamed a question at him. What was the question about? And he was like spinning like a top almost. I mean, just slow, but like, taking those little steps and just taking, doing 360s.
Yeah.
It was really bad optics.
Yeah, it is.
Really bad optics.
Yeah. Wow. Essentially.
It was on Schumer's speech.
Yeah. And it was 1 week after the big State of the Union angry speech. Think about that.
Yeah, wasn't it? That was really interesting how just politically, for as long as I'd cover politics, I don't think, maybe it has. I didn't see anybody write on it, and now everybody's admitting. I saw a number of stories yesterday. Biden got nothing from the State of the Union address. Nothing.
Right.
But a question I don't think I got to ask this yesterday. It popped through my head. It's Friday, so we're trying to clean the desk. Is it that people watch Biden and they don't believe him? Or is it Nobody believes him, so nobody will really watch him anymore except for the entertainment value that's been created by everybody around him saying he is completely normal, there's nothing wrong with him whatsoever, and so people tune in to see the disaster.
No,
and
that's
the disaster is part of the pop culture, but nobody's really listening to him anymore. Nobody's listening to Karine Jean-Pierre anymore. Nobody's actually listening to John Kirby anymore. They've just said, you people, unless it's for entertainment purposes, we're not going to watch.
For all of us who are dealing with it with a family member, millions of families out there dealing with it right now, it's hard to watch. And when you don't have to, you don't. When it's so obvious and you're looking at it, it's like, man, this is just painful to watch. Because it's, with your loved one, of course, they're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that our current president is suffering, and people, the people closest to him are allowing that. They say nothing's wrong. But we see the signs and the behavior itself, his behavior, regardless of what's causing it, is tough to watch.
Oh, it's tough to watch. When I say entertainment purposes only, I say that the entertainment is the people around him denying that there's nothing wrong with him and he's energetic. And the problem with this president is nobody can keep up with him. It's the gaslighting that creates the entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, my point was on the people that have decided not to watch, the ones
Right.
that have tuned out. There's probably a big part of that is, man, this is just, this is bad.
But Democrats should really be worried because I don't remember a State of the Union that actually sent, trying to think, I'm thinking of polls in the 60s, during the middle of, Vietnam and Johnson trying to get out and his poll numbers down.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been extenuating circumstances like that, or, maybe one of the Carter ones when people just didn't buy into anything. By the way, I heard the other day again, because with all the stuff with, when February 22nd hit, the what was it, the 44th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice.
Mm.
And the Malay speech, people were playing cuts of that again. God, I hate that speech.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that more than anything, that he was lecturing Americans. I remember where I was right at that time. And I had my college degree already, and I was working in the machine shop.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't using my college degree. But I was as optimistic as you could possibly imagine. Never affected me what was going on at that time. I never felt, and the people and we were all young. Everybody I worked with was in their 20s. There wasn't this mass depression going around.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been floated in the media, but those are the things I find fascinating. When it's like, oh, there was nothing to be proud of, and the government sucked. And they were doing all the wrong things, but I never viewed that as a reflection on the people of the United States. Look, we're in a tough situation here right now, and Democrats are insane, but we have a country that's still humming along pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
In the private, when you look at and it's the private sector, it's individuals doing it.
Right.
Government is failing us big time. We may be failing ourselves, a significant portion of people, because of how they voted for a significant period of time. But the fact is, it's still working. In the private sector,
right,
it's still working.
Right now is a great depiction of why it's important for the government to stay out of the way.
Yeah. The problems we have are government. We don't blame, we're not up here going, it's the private sector, it's the corporations that are screwing us over, because it's obviously not.
You get less Snickers. No joke. Pal?
God, it's pitiful. Wow. 866-90 Red Eye.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Friday Night Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We have got some great audio coming up from the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing earlier this week on protecting voting rights in America and the whole voter ID thing. That because Merrick Garland came out and said voter ID is racist, here we go again. Now, remember, the left had to back off on it a couple of years ago because they couldn't win the argument. Now they're bringing it up again. They keep bringing up the same argument and losing time in and time out. Now, has anybody asked the Senator Warnock what he thinks of voter ID now?
Yeah,
is it racist again?
Right.
Is it right? Because
has he met anyone new that is against voter ID? Because at one time he said, I don't even know anyone who's against voter ID.
He probably knows Merrick Garland.
I'm guessing he does. I hope he does.
So we will get to that. We'll tell you about the Pentagon commander who warns of the alarming number, thousands of drone incursions at the U.S.-Mexico border, and also the concern about Chinese nationals crossing the border. Every single day, you have law enforcement, you have the Pentagon, you have just the media telling you how incredibly bad it is at the border, how dangerous it is, how vulnerable we are, and the president just keeps going along, and the Democrats as if there's nothing to look at whatsoever there.
Right.
And what was the other thing? It's official now, both from Lyft and Uber. We'll have more in the story coming up following the bottom of the hour, but they are pulling out of Minneapolis because of the living wage standard. Right. So you can do whatever you want. You can sit there. You can say, well, we're gonna do this on a business. You can be Bernie Sanders and say, let's pass 32 hours per week.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're going to save the people you wish to save, because nobody who drives an Uber or Lyft is going to be saved or will have a better life because of what the Minneapolis City Council did.
Right.
Have a line open. 1-866-90-RED-EYE. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. It's official.
What?
Lyft and Uber said they will cease operations in Minneapolis after the city council voted Thursday to override a mayoral veto and require that ride-hailing services increase drivers' wages to the equivalent of the local minimum wage of $15.57 an hour. Lyft called the ordinance deeply flawed, saying in a statement that it supports a minimum earning standard for drivers, but not the one passed by the council. It should be done in an honest way that keeps the service affordable for riders, Lyft said. The ordinance makes our operations unsustainable, and as a result, we are shutting down operations in Minneapolis when the law takes effect on May 1st. Uber did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but news outlets reported that it issued a similar statement saying they would also stop that service that day. Both companies promised to push for statewide legislation that would counter the Minneapolis ordinance. The State House Republicans proposed a bill Thursday that would preempt local regulation of ride-hailing services. The city council first passed the measure last week in a 9-4 vote, despite the mayor's promise to veto it. The measure requires ride-hailing companies, as well, we just told you what it requires them to do. Critics of the bill says costs will likely spike for everyone, including people with low incomes and people with disabilities who rely on ride-hailing services. Supporters say the services have relied on drivers who are often people of color and immigrants for cheap labor. Drivers are human beings and families. They deserve dignified minimum wages like all other workers. Today's vote showed Uber, Lyft, and the mayor that the Minneapolis City Council will not allow the East African community or any community to be exploited for cheap labor. The council chooses workers over corporate greed.
All right.
The Democratic governor, Tim Walz, last year vetoed a bill that would have boosted the pay for Uber and Lyft drivers. Told Associated Press on Wednesday he was concerned because so many depend on those services, including disabled people. He said he believed the companies would pull the plug, and there's nothing to fill that gap. And it's like, yeah, and they talk about the disabled who use it and older people, but actually, you look at the culture of Uber and Lyft. So many is young people that don't want a vehicle.
Right.
They want the responsibility of a vehicle. And so the Minneapolis City Council, we chose workers over corporate greed. Nobody will have a job May 1st.
They're gone. So the question is, do they do this voluntarily? And the answer is yes, they do. And if it doesn't pay well and you believe it's not worth it, then you shouldn't do it. If it is undermining, what you believe is a fair wage, then don't do it as a person. Don't engage in that behavior. I look at it still today. I look at it and say, man, they're going to bring, whether it's restaurant delivery or taking a person to the airport or whatever it is. I'm thinking, oof, man, what is your cost per mile? What is everything else? And somebody, they broke it down there. One of the TV stations there in Minneapolis broke it down and to bring it up to the minimum wage standard in Minneapolis, the companies would have to pay drivers $1.40 per mile and 51 cents per minute for all portions of a ride within Minneapolis. You're getting into cab fare, territory, right? Which means what? You would have to have a meter, which would be the app, to go into effect, or do you have to display that for the consumer in the back seat, like the cabs do, right? I mean, I don't know what the answer is for Uber and Lyft and delivery companies going forward, because the business model to me the business model overall seems flawed. And at some point, you're going to get to a point where people are going, sorry, man, with inflation, and cost per mile, I'm getting, only a few bucks per fare. And that's not worth my time. And by the way, if it's not worth your time, you shouldn't do it. And then the question would be, what is that negotiating point? Because then it gets down to what we pay, if we're going to ask them to take us to the airport, ask them to deliver food to our home. Those things are, that demand and what we're willing to pay is part of the equation, too. The price point clearly matters on the consumer level. So I don't know what it is, but I think there is a major flaw in the business model because they haven't found that out yet. And the thought here is, well, they're taking advantage of immigrants because they come here from very poor nations, and, a few bucks per fare is a lot of money to them. Well, I would still advise, because if you're here in the U.S., you probably have done your research on how to maximize any job that you would qualify for, going in. And you could see, I don't know, fast food, convenience, or retail, or a number of things, technology and all these things. You're probably exploring that. It's hard to speak for any given person. But it's and the thing is that when the government comes in, whether it's a city ordinance, a state like California, or anywhere else, any level of government comes in and says, we're going to set the price point on this in terms of the cost of the labor. Well, actually, the market is, and the market quite often, in fact, outpaces that. And the demand for that labor is so great that those companies profit more and can pay more to incentivize. The business model, again, is flawed, and I don't know what the answer is. But clearly, if Uber and Lyft are gone, you made the point during the bottom of the hour break, think about all the young people that use Uber and Lyft, and in Minneapolis now it's gone.
Well, a lot of young people, they're not buying automobiles like we did.
Right.
And so they wish to live in more urban areas, and they use Uber all the time.
Right.
They use Uber Eats all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's become now over 10 years, you think about it, which now Uber has become, I can remember you and I talking about it, ride sharing, who's going to do it.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture now.
Right.
You don't even think about
yeah,
it anymore.
right.
I mean, it's so easy to do it. You and I have always questioned the business model, and I've been with drivers who complain to me, and then I've been with drivers who do everything correct, like the truck drivers out there that we know that knows exactly what their cost per mile is.
Right.
And what they're making, and they deduct everything on their taxes.
Right.
They keep impeccable records.
Right.
And when I've met those drivers, they seem to be much happier than the drivers that are just doing it part-time and not going through, every single tax benefit that they can get out of it.
Right.
But the fact is, when you're an independent contractor, that should be, if you're not going to do it, you shouldn't be in the business.
Well, that's exactly.
But as we've also stated, that even though we believe the business model is flawed, just because knowing the expense of having a car and what it would cost, there are people that are willing to do it. I still, when I get Uber, they're there like that. Boom.
Yep.
And they come and some of the, I tried the other day because they had a special sale on it. It was the upper level Uber.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh! I got picked up in such a luxury vehicle.
Yeah,
and it was only like it was like $3 more.
Now, now you're getting into and think about it. Even at the other level, it is a premium, and so and for the contractor, there is great opportunity. First of all, keeping your car clean and having a presentable vehicle, that's part of it. Also, being efficient and getting the person there, whatever you're doing, communications and all of that is part of you're trying to get the biggest tip you can get, but also get the greatest rating and all of that. There is great opportunity for those who are willing to do the work. Then you talk about, okay, I know that there's a premium now for during this time frame, during this time of day, going from this part of town to the airport. There are people willing to pay that premium, and there's such a demand that the fares do go up, and I can take advantage of that by being available during those times. Here's how I maximize my earnings here, and then of course, as you mentioned, cost per mile along the way and everything that deduction and thing you.
The thing is, everything is voluntary. Mm-hmm. Nobody is forced to do it.
Yep.
You have to have a car,
right,
in order to do that, which means you're using your own property. That's always something. A whistle that goes off in my head, going, they want to use my property.
Mm-hmm.
As part of the job, I have to use my property. And in this case, your property isn't incidental.
Right.
It's everything. That's the service.
Right.
And so I would have to go through the minutia of it to be willing to do something like that, because they're not just asking me to put in my time, they're asking for me to use a huge chunk of the property that I own, assets that I own. Because most people, if you don't own a home and have equity in the home, the biggest asset you have, especially if you paid off the vehicle, is your car.
Right.
And so, but I look at it and I'm like, but the solution is not to destroy the business.
Well, you think about it like Amazon, when they do the last mile delivery, those vans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those fleets were made available to people. The Amazon as a company basically was looking for contractors to buy in. Let's, set up your fleet so that those contractors can then deliver for us. It is going to be our name on those vans. It's going to be Amazon. I could see, like with Uber Black. I could see maybe maybe they're already looking at this, where we have an Uber Black fleet that, okay, you have to buy as a contractor, buy the fleet, and we set it up this way, but we're going to build you into the system so you buy 2 or 3, 4 luxury vehicles, right? That then you're going to be part of that, and you're going to get that premium. Again, how much demand is there for that level? I think I don't know. It's got to be much smaller than the overall demand. But again, just throwing out ideas because I really don't know what that business model looks like based on what we're willing to pay, what the price point is on the consumer level.
866-90 Red Eye.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. All right, we've got an audio cut coming up following the top of the hour. You got to hear.
All right.
And it was from the voter ID portion of the Senate hearing the other day, and it was just pure greatness. So we'll have that coming up. Pentagon commander warns of alarming number of drone incursions at the U.S.-Mexican border. And, wow, the cities that are growing here in the United States.
Yeah.
Almost 160,000 people moved into the Dallas-Fort Worth area just last year. It's now 8.1 million people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. When I moved
That's insane.
When I'm and if it's going up, it's like growing 160,000 a year. Oh, God, it's unbelievable. I mean, and I think the top three were Dallas-Fort Worth, Atlanta. I'll give the list. I know Tampa was in the top 5.
That's 43 people every day moving it. My gosh. Let me double check that.
Make sure you did your math right. Get out your calculator.
I've got the calculator. That's what I'm using. I'm sorry. I thought, no, that's a small number. 438
a day. Yeah.
Every day. 438 new people every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the United States of America. We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Whenever I say the full name of the country, why do I get goosebumps every time I say that? Every time I say...
Because it's majestic.
It really is. You're right.
It really is.
It really is. That's a great point. When I say that, I go, whoa, wow. It's like, that's some...
When you pare it down to the U.S.
Hold it.
What?
We want to make sure we're not triggering anybody on the left by having this kind of talk.
Actually, I was hoping we would be.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you don't wish to be sensitive?
No. No.
There may be some people who get very upset. So you say the United States of America and it means a lot to you? Yes. You're a nationalist.
All right, whatever. It just sounds so majestic.
I'm an Irish nationalist because it's St. Patrick's Day this weekend.
Oh, there you go.
Irish American
Oh,
nationalist.
that's right. It is this weekend, isn't it?
Look.
Oh, great.
Look. See, look. I'm ready.
What do you
My
got?
shirt. See my shirt?
Most likely to do an Irish goodbye.
Yes.
All right.
An Irish goodbye is when you're at a party and you don't want to say goodbye. Most likely after you've had a few cocktails,
Well,
you don't want to go through the effort of saying goodbye to everybody. And so you just sneak out.
then I only do Irish goodbyes.
It's like
I do that at my own parties that are thrown in my honor, which, by the way, there are none. There are exactly zero. But I always just kind of, I'm out quietly.
and we've all been there. It's like I've talked to everybody, and if I say goodbye, it's going to take me 45 minutes to get out of here.
Well, inevitably,
All
I
right.
get the phone call, like 15 minutes later. It's like, you left without saying goodbye. I'm like, Mom, I got places to be.
That's where you hope. Is the bathroom near the exit?
Right. Because then you could go right out. Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Or is there, better yet, is there a window in the bathroom?
All right, that I've never done.
Yeah, it takes a really bad party to get to that level, but sometimes you need the option.
All right, so here's a little treat for you. All right,
Okay.
With St. Patrick's Day and everything coming up, we need to make you feel good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, this is Representative Wesley Hunt of Texas testifying at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Did I slur that? The Senate Judiciary Committee.
There you go.
I think I did. Another green beer over here.
It's Friday. We get to slur.
Oh, how about some green tea shots?
Oh. All right.
Did I slur there? It was like Senate Judiciary Committee.
This is serious. It's no joke.
They held a hearing on protecting voting rights in America, and what's come up over the last couple of weeks, and this is after Merrick Garland talked about the fact that they're doing everything to fight voter ID laws because it's racist. We're like, oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah.
Now the American public doesn't believe it. Overwhelmingly, doesn't matter what demographic you are.
Right.
Most Americans understand what you want is you want to send the message that an election is secure, and you want the perception too. You want the reality and the perception that elections are secure.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to do that is voter ID. All Americans understand that, except Democrats that wish to have fraud in elections. Let's be blunt. That's why Democrats don't want voter ID.
Right.
They don't want it because they wish to encourage fraud.
Right.
Here's Wesley Hunt talking about the fact that he's a black man and he has 6 forms of ID. How was he possibly ever able to do that?
Huh.
He gets sarcastic in here a few times. Here we go.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham, for having me here today to speak about voting rights in America, the country that I love dearly. More importantly, I'm here to talk about the left's soft bigotry of low expectations. Because it's the Democrat Party, not the Republican Party, that thinks so little of black America as a people of color that they make the case that being black in America means we can't obtain a government ID to vote. And that's not only a ridiculous assertion, it's demeaning and it's insulting. When it comes down to it, many of my colleagues on the left like to pretend that we're still living in the 1950s. Well, we're not. I've got some good news for you. It's 2024, and I know what year it is because I've been black for just over 40 years. And I'm also the son of a retired lieutenant colonel who grew up in a segregated South. You see, my parents grew up in a Jim Crow South in the 50s and 60s in New Orleans, Louisiana. Their next generation, my parents had 3 kids. My sister, brother, and I all went to West Point, all 3 of us. We all served our country in combat. And I sit before you today as a sitting United States congressman in a district in a suburb of Houston, Texas, that's a white majority district, that President Trump would have won by 25 points, and I won by almost 30 points. And that doesn't happen unless we've made some incredible progress in this great nation. Now, my colleagues on the left like to say that common sense voting laws, including requiring a government-issued ID, are racist, discriminatory, and burdensome. Do you know what my father had back in the 40s and 50s before it was even cool? A government-issued ID. And continuing in his footsteps, I too have multiple government-issued IDs, and while that might be shocking to many people in this country, people may ask, how's that happen? It's very simple. It's personal responsibility for all Americans in this country, regardless of what you look like. Sitting with me today is my global entry card, my military ID card, my Texas driver's license, my Texas license to carry, because that's how we roll in Texas, my congressional card, and of course, the good old-fashioned American passport. What sorcery is this? What am I, the Black Houdini? How was I able to pull off the impossible and attain not one, not two, not three, but 6 government-issue IDs? Personal responsibility in this country. I fought for this country as an Apache helicopter pilot to protect free and fair elections, and having a government-issued ID isn't racist, it's American. You need to have an ID to drive a car, to check into the airport, open a bank account. You need an ID for basically everything to be a responsible adult in this country, except for voting, apparently, according to the left. Black America does not need well-meaning liberals putting their arms around us and telling us how we should go to the polls. In fact, if you look at recent headlines and polls, you will find that black men specifically in this country are more fired up than ever to participate in the next presidential election. And I think I know why, and I'm really looking forward to these results. For the record, in the 2022 midterms in Georgia, it proved that election integrity and ballot accessibility can be achieved hand in hand. After the 2020 election, Georgia passed a voter election integrity law, and subsequently, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia alleging that the Georgia law is discriminatory and aims to restrict citizens from voting. President Biden even called this law, and I quote, Jim Crow 2.0. Really? In my humble opinion, referencing Jim Crow for common sense election integrity laws is offensive to those who actually experienced Jim Crow, like my parents and their parents before them. In fact, the law wasn't discriminatory at all, because in the 2022 midterms, Georgia voters shattered voter turnout records across the state. And despite that record-breaking turnout in Georgia, the DOJ lawsuit is still pending. I suspect that it's because that record-breaking turnout resulted in a Republican governor being elected in Georgia, but I digress. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, which I tend to do. I have a lot of respect for John Lewis, but the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is not about protecting voting rights. It's about solidifying Democrat power nationally. It's about federal control over state and local elections, which, by the way, is unconstitutional. It's about diminishing the security of our elections. And voter integrity laws aren't discriminatory. They are required for a functioning constitutional republic. I'm going to tell you today, I categorically reject the soft bigotry of low expectations. Black Americans and people of color are proud. We expect more of ourselves. That's what black excellence really means to me. And above all else, we don't need a new solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Let me be clear. Making it to the polls to vote in person with an ID in this country today is a very low bar, extremely low bar. We can do it, white people can do it, black people can do it, Americans can do it. And we should all want that for free and fair elections. If you want to be on the right side of history, you should reject the Democrats' Party's attempt to wind the clock back 70 years. Because I'm sitting right here in front of you, and I'm here to tell you we've come a long way. Let's continue this progress.
There you go, Wesley Hunt, representative from Texas.
Yep. And he points out there something we talked about and pointed out again recently over the years, and liberals are confounded by it because they're confounded by reality. When you implement such policies and laws and voter ID, then the turnout actually increases, and they hate those reports. That the results actually are quite the opposite of what they said was going to happen. It got to the point that, and we mentioned Senator Warnock out of Georgia saying at one point he doesn't even know anyone who's against voter ID, which was a ridiculous thing to say because it's just look at your own party. And the Democrats have been against this for a long, long time. But over and over again, they were handed reality. Here's what the turnout actually is now after this is in place. And here's what people actually think about it. The polls, we brought the polls that show. People know. It's a very simple equation. When you vote, you should have to be able to prove who you are. And we do that in our society with the picture ID. It's that simple.
Gallup poll back 2 years ago, requiring all voters to provide photo identification at their voting polling place in order to vote. Favor 79%, opposed 21%. Breaking it down, requiring all voters to provide photo identification at their voting place in order to vote. Republicans 97%, Independents 84%, Democrats 53%. Yeah, so you see that.
Well, and in today's society, we know that. Look, you're going to have to. There's certain places and transactions and things that are going to require you to prove who you are in the moment. And as such, we make a practice of carrying our ID with us everywhere we go. And that's a very simple understanding. And people may say, well, I shouldn't have to, and I shouldn't have to. But it's a very basic equation. Hey, because I don't know, it's rare. I don't know if you get this, Gary. Every once in a while, if you're making a certain credit card transaction in person right there, and they'll say, hey, can I, and it could be just their company policy or whatever. You got a photo ID or something. Okay, there you go. It's blue moon territory. It rarely happens.
I got some nighttime cough medicine a month back.
Had to prove your age.
Had to show my ID.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't laugh.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I got a box of wine.
Yeah.
And as we call it on the show, bladder wine.
Right.
And that's because I don't drink a lot. And so there's...
I don't know. I've been told that you treat that bladder like a Capri Sun and you just stab it with a straw and go at it. That could be a rumor that I'm just starting right in this moment. But I just heard it on the radio.
It keeps wine fresh. I don't remember the last time I bought a bottle of wine, because if you open up a bottle of wine, you really have to drink the whole thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it goes on. It goes really quick on you, and the bladder keeps the oxygen out.
It's brilliant technology.
Yes.
And has a purpose.
But still calling it bladder wine, somehow, we have this French exotic wine, or Gary's bladder wine.
Yeah. Yeah, bladder wine. Well, all wine is bladder wine eventually. Let's face it.
The last statistic here, requiring all voters to provide photo identification at their voting place in order to vote. White adults, 80%. People of color, 77%.
The left doesn't win when it comes to, things
Nope.
like reality. Because, again, this isn't one of those rabbit hole topics, that you have to sit down and spend a lot of time with. Hey, do you believe you should have to prove who you are, especially in something as important as voting?
Now, the definition in Gallup poll for people of color, Alaska Natives, American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander.
All right.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at JJ Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. When driving, you need to manage the space around your vehicle so that there's enough space to allow you to adjust when traffic conditions change. The space ahead of your vehicle is the most important and one of the easiest to monitor and adjust as needed. One rule of thumb is to allow at least 1 second for each 10 feet of vehicle length at speeds below 40 miles per hour. At greater speeds, add an additional second. It's impossible to keep other drivers from tailgating you, but there are some things you can do to make it safer, such as increasing your following distance, avoiding quick lane changes, and slowing down. There are also several things you should do to ensure that there is plenty of space between the side of your vehicle and other vehicles. Don't hug the center line, avoid hugging the right side of the road, and avoid traveling alongside other vehicles in strong winds, especially crosswinds. This tip was brought to you by JJ Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We'll say it again. That when you have those kind of landslide numbers on any issue, and you have voter ID, for example, that, roughly, rounding off, 80% of minorities and 80% of whites want voter ID because they want a secure election. If you're the Democrats again or Merrick Garland, now suing because it's racist when clearly the vast majority of Americans, irrespective of the color of their skin or their nationality, believe it is not. The reason the Democrats wish to defeat voter ID is because they want fraud in an election.
Yep.
That's why.
No way around it.
They want fraud in an election. Tell me where I'm wrong.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
Andy, he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Meanwhile, on voting rights, we did this in December, but a new Heartland Institute Rasmussen Reports poll found 1 in 5 voters who cast mail-in ballots during the 2020 presidential election admit to participating in at least one kind of voter fraud.
Wow.
That's unacceptable. That's why we have stated those who push mail-in ballots after knowing these results and these polls showing what they show, if you want mail-in ballots, then you want fraud in an election.
Yeah.
Because if you have 1 in 5, when asked during the 2020 election, did you fill out a ballot in part or in full on behalf of a friend or family member, such as a spouse or child, 21% of respondents who said they voted by mail answered yes. Filling out a ballot for someone else is illegal in the United States, although many states allow people to assist others with voting. How do you know? You don't. Additionally, 17% of mail-in voters said they voted in a state where you were no longer a permanent resident. 17% of mail-in voters admitted to signing a ballot or ballot envelope on behalf of a family member or friend. Both voting in a state where you are no longer a permanent resident and forging a signature on a ballot or ballot envelope are fraudulent activities that invalidate votes when caught by election officials. According to election data, more than 43% of 2020 voters cast ballots by mail, the highest percentage in U.S. history. Further, 10% of all respondents, not just those who said they voted by mail, claimed that they know a friend, a family member, coworker, or other acquaintance who has admitted that he or she cast a mail-in ballot in 2020 in a state other than his or her state of permanent residence. 8% of all respondents said a friend, family member, or organization, such as a political party, offered them pay or a reward for agreeing to vote in the 2020 election. Wow. This was a likely voter poll, by the way. And so there you go. This is why, just like the representative who testified from Texas, we agree with him. You go to the polls, show voter ID.
Yeah.
Except in extenuating circumstances, which you have absentee ballots for, or a hardship
Right.
ballot for somebody who may be disabled.
Right.
Other than that, nope. Why? Fraud. 20% of possible fraud in mail-in ballots is unacceptable in the United States. Why? Because then the perception of rigging an election will always be there.
Yeah, it undermines the integrity and the trust in the system itself. Neither party should want it ever, except if you believe it's going to help you win, and if you believe it's the only tactic that you can use in order to win.
Yeah.
That's when you do it.
So,
Because to them, they don't care if there are fewer people that trust the system. Oh, we'll just help those people vote too. Well, sign something. We'll fill it out.
But the reason this continues is, especially on voter ID. Voter ID is strictly Democrats.
Right.
Democrats there want voter fraud.
Right.
There's no reason. You can't look at the polling because they've been screaming racism for the last 30 years.
Yep.
With voter ID.
Right.
They haven't convinced minorities at all. Hasn't had any effect.
No.
Because everybody understands it's common sense. It's self-evident. That's why the whole voter ID thing being racism is close to gaslighting, because you're not convincing anybody. Right. Isn't it obvious? No, it's not obvious to anybody, including minorities. They understand. So if you're pushing voter ID laws or you're pushing to reverse them as Merrick Garland did, you want voter fraud.
Yep.
And now, with the polling that's been done out there on mail-in ballots, everything that we feared, everything, somebody filling out somebody's ballot, whatever, we know, and Rasmussen isn't the only poll that's done it. Other pollsters have done it. We know there is a significant amount, there is an unacceptable amount of fraud that we accept.
Right.
And so that means a significant number of people, after knowing what is going on here, want voter fraud. It's not about voter rights. It's about the promotion of voter fraud. just like Chuck Schumer yesterday, is not pro-Palestinian. He is pro-terrorist. Oh, by the way, I did see where he backed off.
Oh, you did find it? Okay.
Yeah, I did find the tweet
Okay.
where he said it, and he was called out on it. He goes, well, no other country should tell another country how to run their elections. It's like, oh, my God. And I think it was, the columnist from the New York Post called him out. My God, that took you 4 hours to run that back. Couldn't you figure out how stupid that was?
Right.
To say that? But, yeah. So there you go. And so Representative Hunt was just great there. It was a great speech that he made because it's true.
Well, the facts are on his side, as with conservatives when we talk about these things. And the truth is what, of course, stops the left. The truth is what stops the left, which means the only path to winning long-term must include voter fraud. Because if you can't get it done with the truth, then you're just going to have to cheat.
And I'm glad Representative Hunt brought up the fact of what Joe Biden said about the Georgia election law.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he said it was, Jim Crow 2.0.
Yeah.
And we have said that's the racism of Joe Biden.
Right.
That's the racism of the Democratic Party. We've talked about how when, even in the summer of 2020, when it was, racism is institutionalized and systemic in our society. Absolutely it is. Squarely inside the Democratic Party.
Right.
Identity politics. You judge people by groups and not individuals. And in the case of the president, in what he said about the Georgia election law, he lied about that in order to make people hate each other based on their race.
Right.
That's what the worst white supremacist leader does out there, and that's what Joe Biden did. Please tell me where I'm wrong.
Right.
Because anybody knows that law was not Jim Crow. You can't compare Jim Crow to that. He did that to make people hate each other based on a lie and based on race.
Yep. To instill fear.
Yep.
Again, lying, cheating, it has to be the game plan because the truth defeats you. When you can't win on the merits of the ideas you promote, when the truth works against you at every turn, this is where we are right now. Reality, the cold, hard truth, is at their doorstep at every turn. The border, national security in general, inflation, the depletion of the buying power of the American family. All of these things. And then, of course, their radical agenda with wanting to teach children sexualized content in school and also wanting to tell parents they have no right in the decision-making if their child wants to have genital mutilation surgery.
Yeah, you saw that we talked about it yesterday, Great Britain, the NHS stopping.
Puberty blockers.
Yep.
That just sounds so bizarre. Those words sound bizarre. The fact that they had to act on it officially.
I know.
I mean, that has hit me so many times in recent days with that story. What in the world? They had to act. They had to go out of their way. They proactively had to ban them. The fact that they exist.
I know. Well, the thing was, when I first saw that, and I saw it was the NHS that controls the healthcare system, sorry I'm cynical, but the first thought I had was, oh, it must be costing them money.
Yeah, you did the pre-show meeting.
Right, remember
that night, the pre-show meeting. Well, yeah, but you know what their motivation is. That's costing them. The NHS is going broke over the whole
Right.
thing.
I'm saying they can't be doing this because they believe it's immoral for children to be able to do this and to enable children to do this. It has to be, wow, the government health care plan is running out of money. Now, they claim that's not the case. And, we said this is what they claim. They claim that it is not the right thing to do.
Right.
So, and that's going to happen in the United States, by the way. This is all going to be reversed because you can't win on it.
That's again, part of my point of the reality coming back at Democrats. The American people don't agree with this radical agenda. They don't, and the American people dealing with inflation, dealing with the southern border being broken, and then all the other national security issues right now that we're facing as a nation, and the weakness of right now the executive branch, this current commander-in-chief, who's not capable. All of these realities are just pummeling the left. There are those who will stick to them, millions of people who will still vote for their party, but on the issues, the American people don't stand with the Democrats.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up, following the top of the hour, an Australian health agency says stop using the term long COVID. We'll get into the specifics of that one because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
The RNC saying that the RNC is not paying any legal bills for Donald Trump. We talked about this the other day.
Yeah, okay.
That, what about, fundraising for the Republicans right now is a problem. Now, the Trump campaign is spending a tremendous amount of money on legal fees, his legal fees.
Mm-hmm.
And so the RNC is letting people know because they're having problems getting money. And you've got people that want to donate saying, well, look, we got a campaign.
Yeah,
I'm not here just to pay off Trump's legal bills.
Right.
We want to win, too. So where do we put our money? And it's like, okay, the RNC is trying to say, give it to us so we can help all candidates out there.
And you mentioned in the pre-show meeting, look, there's a reason, motivation to tell everyone, hey, the money's not going for legal defense. They're having to do that in order to convince people. It's not a good situation right now. I think they have to get the confidence back in the donors. For that reason, there are others that look at it, and we said, and we can't quantify what the percentage is, but there are plenty of people that likely look at the two-tier system the way that we do, and that further that will motivate them to actually donate, knowing the money's going for legal fund purposes. But most donors are looking for that money to go to a campaign, advertising, getting those ads out there. And the GOP needs to get some real ads done. They're going to have to just blast the media with ads, and you need money.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.